Thank you so much, Alice. It's so wonderful to be here with you all. I was really excited when Judy sent me an email. And as I was creating this PowerPoint today to share with you about spiritual activism, I was just going through a wave of emotions as I was reflecting on the past 5 years since doing Project Green Challenge. And I truly owe this challenge as a seed for birthing an entire garden within me and reminding me of the power of individual and collective action and how times can get tough. This year is a good example of how times can become challenging and heavy on your heart, but you have to pick yourself up and keep going, because as you keep going, the journey grows deeper and it becomes more brilliant and more vivid. So I'm going to share my screen. Is that okay? Would you guys? Okay, let's do this. Okay, and I think it's this full screen. Okay, great. I can still see you guys. I'll do this so you can see more of the screen. So I can't see you guys, but I'm wondering if you can ask yourself the question of, have you heard of spiritual activism? What is this to you? And I think it's a topic that's been around for a while, but it's not widely discussed. And as someone who's been an activist for, I feel, a lot of my life, this recent practice of mine of bringing spirituality into my activism has been what I find most sustainable for me as an activist, for my health and my body, everyday vigor. So I entitled this Spiritual Activism for the Courageous Hearted Warriors on a Mission to Co-Create a New World, how I envision all of you amazing Project Green Challenge finalists. Okay. So Alice mentioned a little bit about me. My name is Marina, and I created a platform online called Eco Goddess, and this name was inspired by my superhero, my Shiro. If I were to imagine who my superhero is, it would be the goddess of the earth, a manifestation of the divine feminine who advocates for people on the planet and protects this beautiful gift that we've been given. And so they always say, if you want to become your superhero, to try your very best every day to live in those footsteps. And so I thought, why not call my platform Eco Goddess? And so I date my activist journey back to when I was 10 years old, and I've written a longer essay and article on the platform Intersectional Environmentalist called Reflections of a Multicultural Environmentalist. So if you're interested in reading that, you can read more about this trip that I had when I was 10. But to briefly go over it today, at this age, I traveled to my father's home country of Pakistan. And this was the first time I traveled outside of the United States, so I wasn't sure what to expect. I grew up watching a lot of Bollywood, so of course my 10-year-old mind was like, oh, it's going to be a Bollywood romance. I'm going to go there, put on a lot of clothes, and it'll just be this grand fantasy adventure. And while it was a lot of that, I was enamored by the beautiful mosques and the outdoor markets filled with exquisite scents and new food, jewelry. I couldn't help but notice some key differences between the United States and Pakistan, where I grew up. The most prominent differences was the pollution. And trash decorated the streets like an inescapable disease. And something that I've realized as I've grown older is it's not that in the United States we don't have trash and it's not a problem. It's just that we have the infrastructure to tuck it away. So in a sense, we're actually prone to more disconnection between our unconscious consumerism. And another key difference that I witnessed was the air pollution. And one night I was sick there. I got the flu, likely from just the travel and the stress on my body. I blew my nose into a tissue. It's kind of a funny story, but this tissue would actually change my life, because in the tissue I saw black soot, and I didn't make the connection at the time that this was an end product of my environment, of the air pollution. But my mother told me this, and it was in that moment that I made the connection that our actions impact our environment. What a mind-blowing sentiment. It sounds so simple, but really think about that. Our actions impact our environment. And it can be negative actions, perhaps throwing a bunch of plastic in the ocean, or it could be a positive impact, like taking a reusable cup to a restaurant or to a cafe and someone seeing that in line and thinking, oh wow, that doesn't look so hard, maybe I can do that. So this trip that I had when I was 10 really informed the rest of my decisions in life. And I started a Save the World journal when I returned home to the United States. And I carried this Save the World journal mentality and sentiment with me throughout my entire life. And I now view Eco Goddess as an extension of that childhood journal of wishing to do the best that I can as an individual and work with others collectively to make the world a better place. So let's dive into this idea of what a spiritual activist is. I'm going to be dissecting the definition, and I'll start with the main definition and the meaning of it to me and what it means. So a spiritual activist is one who is a courageous warrior of love. Being a spiritual activist means working to create a loving, just, sacred, and sustainable world through means that are also loving, just, sacred, and sustainable. A spiritual activist practices empathy in word and deed as a way to build beloved communities and transform consciousness. As we all know, love is not simply a feeling, it's a verb. It's something that you can put into action, which is, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful things about life. A spiritual activist practices personal transformation as an integral part of the process of creating a better world. They also practice love in action. To practice love means responding to others from a place of compassion and empathy, and to see the embodiment of the sacred in all beings. I love this quote by Kyra Shaughnessy. She is an activist musician in Canada. She says, "What good is being revered as a hardcore, dedicated political activist if we still replicate oppressive patterns in our intimate relationships, be it with our partners or our bodies?" So I feel like this simple quote ties together the whole idea of spiritual activism of if we do not do our inner work and truly work on ourselves, how can we show up in the world beyond? How can we really walk our talk? And so now we're going to dissect the words just, sacred, and sustainable. So what do I mean by just? Well, by just, this means a world where all forms of equity and dehumanization are overcome, not only through the necessary legal and political channels, but also, and more importantly, through consciousness raising and the transformation of people's hearts and minds. This can only come from empathy, understanding, trust, and compassion. And I'm sure you guys can relate to feeling less than if someone judges you for something. And I'll admit to this in my activist journey before I found a spiritual practice and a way of really leading from a place of compassion. I would have strong judgment in myself towards others who didn't live exactly the way that I lived. And as well-intentioned as you may be, you'll find over and over again that this isn't going to speak to people's hearts and minds. It's going to put a barrier, and they're not going to be able to hear what you're actually saying. So just means you're living from that and leading by example with your heart. What does sacred mean? So by sacred, this means seeing the inherent beauty, awe, wonder, and radical amazement of the universe and the planet, and enhancing our capacity to appreciate the sacred in and feel our sense of interconnectedness with the universe. So how do I practice the sacred and honoring the sacred? in many ways. I've embedded it in my morning routine and really my entire life. And one of my favorite practices is earthing. You guys have likely heard of this practice, and there's a whole documentary on it, which correlates it to science and how this can actually reduce a number of ailments in the human body. I can contribute to and support that, which is amazing. But I like to earth daily and just to go outside and put my naked feet on the ground and appreciate and have that bare connection to the planet. And I wanted to mention here that one of the hardest years of my life thus far was actually in 2019. I had kind of lost touch with my spirituality and wasn't working a ton on myself. And this led to me actually losing my sense of purpose and losing my mission, which eventually led to me really struggling with my mental health and some days struggling to even get out of bed. And this is, I feel, an illustration of what can happen to many of us when times get tough or we're just facing some dark nights of the soul, we're facing some of our demons. And in those moments, rather than being hard on ourselves and being like, get up, come on, do the thing, just do it, be happy, which is what I was doing to myself, it's actually quite the opposite. We need to have patience with ourselves and to remind ourselves that we too are beings of the earth. We are sacred, and we need to honor the emotions that we're feeling. We need to sit with them, and we need to learn how we can work with them and not against them, and treat the things that are happening to us that they're not happening to us, but rather for us. So the last word that I wanted to dive into is sustainable, and you all are stewards of this, and you know this word far too well. But in my eyes, and in terms of spiritual activism, sustainable means living in a world in which all human activity is ecologically sensitive, such that the world functions in a way that ensures the longevity and well-being of the life support system of the planet and its inhabitants through just economic, social, and political systems. And you guys have learned in this 30-day challenge of how you can embed sustainability in really every lifestyle choice that you make. And a way that I've woven this into my lifestyle is by moving onto a property that I can grow my own food. I live in Encinitas, California here, and we have a small 2-acre farm where I get to grow things. I have animals, 2 goats, and a bunch of farm cats and a bunny. And I get to truly live in alignment with my values and in alignment with my most joyous and vibrant self. And I want to pose that question of what would be your ideal place to live? What would be your ideal room? Even if you could just perfect your room and make it a sacred space for you to spend your time in, to work, to sleep, to create. How can you make that your own, and how can you make that your environment to live from that place within you that wants to show up as a sustainable activist and a spiritual activist? So that concludes the definition and my presentation on spiritual activism, and I wanted to congratulate all of you again on being finalists of Project Green Challenge 2020. And Judy had mentioned to me that this year's theme is resilience. And I feel from my experience in being an activist and in having this yearning within me to show up as my brightest self and to be on the front lines, standing with people hand in hand for the future of our planet. I wouldn't be able to accomplish resiliency if it weren't for dedication to myself, to self-love and to self-care, and to ensuring that my happiness is just as important as the happiness of the entire collective and the planet. So thank you everyone for having me. It's such a joy to share about this this topic that's near and dear to my heart, and wishing you all a beautiful day.